Yeah, slug. Yes, our number 2 is busy engaging over. Hey. No!
While some South African National Defence Forces troops will continue to remain in eastern DRC to maintain law and order and to make sure that the two warring sides are not fighting again. This is the information that we are getting from the South African National Defence leadership as more information is being shared on what exactly happened in that battle for Goma, how many were injured and how many lost their lives, and how many South African National Defence Forces troops have lost their lives between 2020 to 2024 in another mission that is in DRC. Well, that is part of the story that I'm going to tell you in this video, as well as what's next right now after the South African National Defence Forces troops are withdrawing as part of Samidrc. Well, this is Bonafide. If you haven't subscribed, kindly subscribe and hit that notification button so that when I release something new on the Eastern DRC crisis and the South African National Defence Forces troops, you get notified as soon as possible. Well, questions continue to be asked about what exactly happened in that battle for Goma where 14 of the South African National Defence Forces troops lost their lives. And this is coming even after the Samidrc troops are now withdrawing from Eastern DRC, from Sake and Goma respectively. They say that they are withdrawing immediately to go back to their countries. And the top general of the South African National Defence Forces has called the mission a success. That what they went to do in Eastern DRC, although not fully achieved, has been achieved by the South African National Defence Forces. In that particular statement, they said that a total of 174 South African soldiers were injured while deployed to the DRC over 15 months as part of the Samidrc mission. And the leading cause of injury of these 174 troops was shrapnel. Shrapnels are fragments of a bomb or shell or other object thrown out by an explosion. Now, of these 174, 133 of the injured and wounded returned to South Africa on the 23rd and 25th of February following the battle for Goma, in which 14 South African National Defence Forces soldiers died. Then last year, 13 wounded members were repatriated to South Africa. 2 soldiers fell pregnant while they were on deployment, with both right now back in South Africa. Not all of the troops have already returned to South Africa. The first batch have already gone to South Africa, people who are critical, but there are still some of the South African National Defence Forces troops, part of the Samidrc, some of the Malawian troops and some of the Tanzanian troops still in Goma and Sake, and they're withdrawing in phases. According to the government of South Africa, by the end of this month, the month of May, all South African Defence Forces troops part of Samidrc will have withdrawn from Eastern DRC. But it is important to note that the South African National Defence Forces troops will still be part of Monusco. And that means that there are some of the South African National Defence Forces troops that will still serve in Eastern DRC. Monusco has been perhaps the longest UN mission anywhere on earth. This mission has stayed in Eastern DRC for the longest. Many countries are participating in Monusco, including Kenya, that has been sending their troops in Eastern DRC to be part of Monusco to de-escalate the conflict in Eastern DRC. While the mission has been there for decades, it has done very little to stop the clashes that we are seeing in Eastern DRC. Even the recent clashes that have been happening in Eastern DRC have been happening with Monusco still on the ground, with Monusco out in public, trying to show the public that it is there and it is trying to prevent the escalation of conflict. But we know that the M23, we know that there was a Lendo and the FARDC have been fighting on different fronts. Burundian Defense Forces, they have been fighting on different fronts as if Monusco didn't exist, as if the Samidrc did not exist. And the conflict in Eastern DRC still continues even as we are speaking right now. The battle is still continuing on different fronts in Eastern DRC. As I said in a report just yesterday, about 30,000 people fled their homes just from the past weekend because of the upscale of violence in North Kivu. And when the South African National Defence Forces leadership was asked What about Monusco? How many South African National Defense Forces troops have we lost in Monusco? The answer was that 18 South African National Defense Forces soldiers died on deployment to the DRC between 2020 and 2024, primarily with the United Nations Monusco mission. Therefore, the mission is as dangerous as any other mission that has been in Eastern DRC. We know that the East African Regional Force led by Kenya was in Eastern DRC. That was told to leave by the DRC government. They say that the East Africa Regional Force was not assisting in any way in Eastern DRC to quell the insurgencies. They say that they were lenient to the rebels and did not want to engage the rebels. On its part, the East African Regional Force say that there were successes during the EACRF deployment in Eastern DRC, that the guns were silent and there was no fighting in Eastern DRC. Then came the Samidrc, and right now you know what happened with the Samidrc when they tried to engage the M23. 14 of the Samidrc troops, mostly from the South African National Defense Forces, lost their lives while they were trying to engage the M23 in Eastern DRC. The Samidrc is now withdrawing from Eastern DRC. That leaves only Monusco to be the international force that is in Eastern DRC, trying to prevent the loss of lives and the loss of property that is happening in Eastern DRC. While the top soldier, that is the leadership, the general of the South African National Defense Forces, has called the mission a success, the opposition party in South Africa, the Democratic Alliance, came out strongly to say that that mission should not be called a success because 14 of the South African National Defense Forces troops lost their lives and many were wounded in that particular onslaught. And they say that there is a need to have further investigations about what exactly happened. And they pointed out that you cannot deploy your forces in a foreign country without the adequate support that they need, without air support, without critical support that will have prevented the loss of lives that happened in Eastern DRC. The DA say that let us not call it a success and let us face what happened in Eastern DRC. People lost their lives that shouldn't have happened. The FARDC were not there to strongly support the South African National Defense Forces. The FARDC have been weak. They have been supported by the Wazalendo. And that means that if the South African National Defense Forces or Samidrc were putting their lives with the locals, that is the FARDC, they flopped, and that might have caused the loss of lives that were witnessed early on in the year between the Samidrc and the M23. Well, I will keep you informed of the latest of what is happening in Eastern DRC. Keep it bona fide.